Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. Well, the big day is here. We are getting ready to invade the Soviet Union. If we change the word to Russia, which of course is a territorial and ethnic group of people there, it is Russia. And it was, I guess, still called officially Russia as a Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. There was the Russian Republic or whatever, you know, a Soviet Republic of Russia or whatever that was, as part of it. And that term, invading Russia, is been amply demonstrated as a not a smart move to do. And often thought about the French campaign and read some about it, mostly from the French side of Napoleon invading. And with Napoleon's experience, it's just, get to the capital, Vienna, and defeat the army outside the capital after you take the capital. And, if the enemy can't hold its capital, the enemy's going to at least settle for terms, because when he often defeated the Austrians still had a lot of fight left in them, and France really didn't have the ready capacity to, brutally come in and occupy the Austrian Empire at the time. But they did defeat the main army and could continue to do a lot of damage. So if you could create a reasonable settlement that the losing side would accept, you could have peace. That was sort of the thing. So Napoleon, just one more city, just get to Moscow and just defeat that army, like Borodino outside of Moscow, and then take Moscow, and then the Russians are going to have to settle for a peace agreement, because it never even entered Napoleon's head that he was going to somehow add Russia to the French Empire or something like that. No. He just, I don't know exactly all of his political aims, but especially after previous having the Tilsit peace conference with the Tsar, that somehow, remove Russia from the Napoleon, or Russia from European politics, and recognize Poland and some other sort of vassal states of the French Empire, and sort of marginalize Russia is what I think his goal was, more or less. And so I've often thought that had he, instead of doing a Napoleonic campaign, because Napoleon was always about that drive to destroy the enemy's fighting capacity in large armies, and when he can do that, he was normally victorious. Had he done a gradual multi-year go achieve a control of an area, that's not a good thing. Achieve a control an area, build get in and fortify, capture some fortifications, some rivers or whatever, build in some supplies, because he definitely had that capacity, and then next year's move further, and each time. And so if build support up, and because he had more than just the one army moving to Moscow, he had a northern and a southern sort of army going on as well. Often the other supporting armies were less than willing. I know, I believe part of the northern wing army was a Spanish Bourbon army that had been allied with French Napoleonic France, as in the Battle of Trafalgar, when in 1805 the Spanish and the French fought the British at sea. Well, later, of course, Napoleon does a coup d'etat against the Spanish monarchy, and puts his brother Jerome, I think it was, as the new king of Spain into the French system. So the French rebel. Well, this Bourbonistic Spanish army was already well outside of Spain, and was sort of stuck at that point. And what is it going to do? Can't march back to Spain. The officers and men didn't support the Napoleonic rule of Spain, but they're sort of stuck and continue to have to fight for Napoleon for at least a time. And so they were sort of, had, you know, a remote army sort of stuck that way. And so there was other sort of reluctant allies of Napoleon there. And that is, to some degree, reluctant allies of Hitler down in this part of the world. Definitely Romania wanted to get its land back, and a good portion of the Romanians wanted to get it. Sort of, to some degree, make up. Well, there's... how do I put this? Most ethnic groups want larger territories. Okay. And ethnic groups are often expressed with nationalism as a nation. Often, not always, but often, there are real current and or historical, and often lost the territory by violent force, but also the people were moved out by violence, people wanting return. It's often called irredentism, wanting return of its lost lands. We can sort of see this in Hungary here. It's gotten some territory from Yugoslavia here. It's gotten other territory down here from Yugoslavia. It's gotten from Romania that had been part of the Austrian, or the Hungarian part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, until Romania joins the Allies, was on the winning side, more so than wins the war, is on the winning side, and gobbles up some territory that did have Hungarians, ethnic Hungarians in it, and had been part of Hungary, and then Slovakia and this parts of Czechoslovakia, whatever. You know, it's gotten back its sort of greater Hungarian areas. Technically, to some degree, the Hungarian Empire as part of it controlled lands down to the sea here. But, you know, so we can, this is sort of a recent loss and gain that they want their territory back. So I don't blame, as a bad thing, any ethnic group. Well, we want more territory. And you can look at, we do today, sort of the borders are settled issues, and they, for the most part, perspective in Europe, they are settled issues. But if you look historically, they aren't settled issues. Just because for 50 years doesn't mean that that is where the border should and always will be. It's just the way humans are. So there definitely was an aspect of wanting bigger territory, and there definitely is an anti-communist aspect. But a lot of the soldiers and even a lot of the officer corps really didn't have a great crusade mentality of wanting to fight a brutal war against the Soviets. So we're going to do this not, well, how do I put this? Not advisable while you have other active enemies, especially when you have other super active enemies, superpower, if you will, almost. Superpower really doesn't happen until you get nuclear weapons, but great power, greatest power, if you will. I mean, Germany, of course, is a great power, but so was Napoleonic France. And part of the problem is and a few people have brought up a while ago now, but when we were talking about the Soviet invasion for the alt version of this series earlier, and the invasion of the Soviets for the Hearts of Iron 4 series, could have Hitler have won? And some of the people are rethinking the unlikelihood, if, you know, even if he did take Moscow, Leningrad, and Stalingrad. Now, and I sort of point out, well, at some point, the Soviet army and the Soviet government is going to collapse. It just is. And there was a few high-ranking, and Vasilov, I'm sure I'm messing up the pronunciation of the name, the one Soviet general who defected to the Germans and set up the Russian Army of Liberation, said, well, yeah, they agree that eventually it would collapse once you get to the, I'm talking a lot here, but the Ural Mountains, and that, well, yes and no. Like, I agree that at some point they're going to collapse. Now, it all depends. If you're talking like a first year, almost get to Moscow, hold out. Okay. Second year, take Moscow and Leningrad. Third year, take Stalingrad. Fourth year, take Kubyshev or Gorky. Where's Gorky? Gorky's over here. All right, yeah, Gorky. Take Gorky or something. If it's incremental and slowly being pushed back, the Soviet government, whether that's with Stalin or without Stalin, because I could easily see a even down to a battalion level, quite honestly, just some officer or a group of officers realize that Stalin is just making too many stupid moves, and just do a putsch against him and kill him off without killing off the Soviet system that's behind him. Though the question comes, is there and Stalin made sure there sort of wasn't a good alternative leadership that could replace him, so that would probably break out into a civil war. But so probably with Stalin, and continuing incremental losses, that the Soviet Union could continue as a definable single entity, as opposed to, like I just said, if there's a civil war of multi-sided, groups that support the idea of the Soviet Union, support it, but they each think they're in charge and are sort of fighting / competing with each other. But if you see a first campaign, not within the first 365 days, but in the first spring through fall campaign season, taking Leningrad, Stalingrad, and Moscow, taking all three of those cities, that, just like, oh my God, they've wrecked and destroyed basically the complete Western armies of the Soviet Union. That there may be the various, because there was sort of a long-term Eastern force that had been, and I've been reading a bit more about it, skirmishing with the Manchukuo's force out here for a long time, and a more recent move, like around 1940, of a more advanced, with the T-34 type tanks, more advanced army moved east to sort of maybe deal with Japan, and that particularly is the army that did the winter counteroffensive out of Moscow. So those armies may still exist, but had you destroyed everything here in the West, that you could easily see I could easily see at that point a Soviet governmental collapse, and with multi-factions, some generals that come out as anti-Soviet, maybe regional, trying to grab a region, some trying to stay loyal to the idea of a Soviet republic, and just others wanting to give up to the Germans to make a reasonable peace settlement for Russia, whatever that might mean. And so I could see all that happening. It depends on the speed of the attack and the advances. If it's gradual, I think it could stay a long time. But yes, at some point, even if Japan never invades, getting back out here, you're going to, this part of the Soviets or whatever, if the Germans are here, they're just going to collapse. At some point, they're just going to collapse. It just happens. Okay, well, so we're going to, I saved just before the starting of this episode, we're going to do Operation Barbarossa. So we are now at war with the Soviet Union, and we now have a bunch of options to do here. But one of the things I wanted to do with that, I'm doing that, and I'm just because of things here, we're going to put up the air, and I want to make sure it air intercept. It include, and so you have to basically wait for the declaration of war, which can be a bit painful. Where I do like in Hearts of Iron 4, they won't start operating. You can put up the air over a region that you can't currently fly over, and it just won't fly over it, but it will know to be ready to fly over it once they get permission. So even if it, earlier had been telling it to be operational in this part of the world, I want to make sure it includes regions now. Okay. Make sure we got everywhere. I am a little weak on the air on the east, and I know that. I'm partially continuing to build more air. And very well may shift more air, hoping some of this stuff like here can operate from the center or western a bit more and still be helpful here. We don't yet know what the threat level will be. Good. I thought there was something here. So we have that now operating. Here we're going to move you I want to get across here, and this is sort of long-term planning that obviously I will be very readily changing. As you can see, I'm trying to avoid both secure and avoid things. Avoid like trying to do a river crossing too much against this fortified line here of two provinces, so going there, that kind of thing. Now we'll add you to that attack, and we're going to attack there. We're going to sort of presume we're going to be victorious here. And sort of secure the him sort of lead this battle. These are just sort of weak incidental forces that will help out. That's the attack. These are sort of the main attacking force. Okay. And I think we need to go in here and occupy up. Now let's go here. Occupy it through here in the central area. You can see I'm trying to particularly this. Obviously you can only strike from one province this province. Here I'm trying to make sure I'm striking from three provinces, or from two provinces here to spread out the attack a bit better. Well, do I go for the swamp? Yeah. Because they're the good swamp fighters. Here is sort of actually the main attacking force. See lots and lots of corps headquarters. I'm being a little hypersensitive maybe to some of the terrain types here, but we're going to see how well it goes. I'm hoping for speed and velocity. That's why I'm going into the province, which are plains. We're going to be just hopefully smashing that division very fast. Okay, I think we've got that division smashed pretty well. Let's see about... I forget who I was going to attach into right offhand. Okay, he is to attack here. Here. He with this. Yeah. Hopefully that will work well. And just overrun. I have a bottleneck here. And that's one that I've had every time I freaking played this. And I'm just sort of hoping I can mitigate it, make it a lot less. So if you sort of noticed, I moved these guys, came down here, at least one division, and met up, and then here, these guys here, so it's creating a pocket there. At least that's the concept. Now with all of that, let's get some armor too. I'm planning also on, because I think I'm overkill on some of this armor here, right now. And I'm hoping that I can quickly, once the battle's won, follow up and through with units that aren't part of the attack, and speedily keep them in its wake. Okay. At some point I'm gonna maybe use some of these Jaeger units, which are fairly good at urban combat as well. Come back in and deal with that city. It's going to be sort of slow. Might as well use you. I think I want to send too many more divisions into that, but I want to hit that province from multiple directions. So that's where that hammer blow is going to fall now. Let's just see. How deep we can move Guderian rapidly. Through there. We're going to be part of the move down through here and try to cut them off. Route. So let's scrape the bottom of this swamp area. That. Again, we want to hit from more than one province, so here. Yeah, let's see if we can drive over this. I've sometimes gotten through this, or sometimes it's taken me a bit longer. But obviously each time is a little different. A bit different. Okay, we're going to hopefully trap all these guys here. Now down here we have everything from unopposed. And hopefully run to Odessa. Get through before it's occupied. I think they are theoretically moving units down to see what we have here. Okay. Oh, wait a minute, that guy should go with them. That's why it was moved down here, I forgot. There we go. Now we have this guy with anti-tank as well. So currently we are not going to attack out of here because I want this to still be a Soviet province. I'm planning on well, actually, you know, because I know I have this here, let me just grab these guys, fly them up to here. Now, we also we're going to be attacking through here, so let's just bomb there. And a bomb here. Let's see if we can move something. Okay, now let's see. Destiny. Until August 10th, 1942, so from April through to August. National manpower plus 30%. IC's down 5%. Crude oil down 10%. That sucks. Leadership modifier minus 5%. Big deal. I'm just with our current conditions here. I mean, any negative is not good, but big deal. Organization regain rate plus 10%. That's great. Supply throughput plus 10%. Hard attack plus 5. Soft attack plus 5. Air intercept efficiency plus 25. We'll get the world will hold its breath event, and we'll get Barbarossa difficulty settings event. Okay. Winter clothes. No, we are not case Anton. Winter clothes. Okay. Well, the Slovakian expeditionary group. That is unequivocal. I want that. Original Slovakian formation was the Slovakian Expeditionary Army Group. Commanded by the Slovak Minister of Defense, Ferdinand Karthos. It was composed of 4,500 men as the Wehrmacht drove into the Soviet Union, the SEAG had trouble keeping up, primarily because it was not well equipped, as the Germans and lacked vehicles needed for mobility. The Germans themselves were not fully mobile and thus unwilling to divert equipment deliveries from their own troops to their allies. The Slovaks decided to reorganize, and all the motorized units of the Slovak Army Group were combined into a single formation named the Slovak Mobile Command, or the Brigade Pilfunzik, commanded by Rudolf Pilfunzik. Well, that makes sense. He had formerly commanded the 2nd Slovak Division. The SMC participated in several major campaigns in Barbarossa. Okay, well, just as a general note, I think I got this from reading Manstein's book. I forget. It's quite honestly, just if you haven't sort of realized, I am fairly well read, but it's probably been 20 years. And that's a long time, folks. Some of you are barely alive that long. Since I've really read Panzer Leader by Guderian, Achtung Panzer by Guderian, Lost Victories by von Manstein, and a bunch of other stuff along those, but those are just 3 that I'm able to quickly look over at my bookshelf across the room and see and read that are specifically about these campaigns written by the guys that were fighting this, as opposed to, I got, Hitler's generals and other, there's just a chapter about different German army generals. You throw in the name Hitler or Nazi, you sort of get more book sales on the cover. So sometimes the, titles are a bit inflammatory, shall we say. But Achtung Panzer, if I remember correctly, was written before the war. That's sort of Guderian's, just like I said, it's been a long time, laying out his theories and this kinds of things, where Panzer Leader is written post-war. And so post-war, get the benefit of hindsight, plus, shall we say, the way he remembers it, the way he wants to be remembered, sort of retelling. Doesn't mean that any of it's untrue. It just, perspective changes, influence changes, may be very different than what was at the time. So the way it's remembered. So I don't really remember. And quite honestly, all these books have sort of melded together in my mind as sort of my reading experience on the German army. A bunch of other stuff, Rommel and that kind of thing I've read, but I was specifically talking about Eastern Front experiences. And so they all sort of come together in my mind after all these years, and just the way my mind works. So, opinions, ideas that may have been Manstein's, I may attribute to Guderian after all these years, or vice versa, or whatever. But there really was, or had been, a feeling, to some degree, within the German, shall we say, military political command, not National Socialists I'm talking about, but sort of that dealing with the military, that the Slovaks were going to be a real net contributor to the German armed forces, because they looked and saw and really, I think, thought the Czechoslovakian army was a rather professional, rather well-equipped, rather pretty decent organization. I really think they felt that. And this is, from before, the Munich conference and whatever else. This was a really sort of professional outfit from, I presume, years of dealing with them and observing them. And they were ultimately, and this was, I'm getting this opinion again from one of these generals, or more than one of these generals, well before the war was sort of over, sort of the midpoint, that they were really disappointed in the Slovakian Corps. And they didn't do very well. And I think it's because of we can use the modern term, racism, but it really wasn't racism. It was sort of the ethno-primacy of the Czechs in the Czechoslovakian state and the Czechoslovakian army. And so that most of the officer corps and most of the NCO corps, this is, again, my understanding, and whether it's a Slovak patriots or just other knowledgeable people in the history may want to correct me, but the great bulk of the officer corps and the NCO corps were Czechs. And the Slovaks, to some degree, not that they weren't patriotic, not that they didn't volunteer for the army. I'm sure they did that, and the significant numbers did that to them. But they were mostly used by the Czechs as additional conscripted manpower, I should say, and that helped bulk up the army. But whether they weren't trusted because they thought that they were anti-Czechoslovakian and pro-Slovakian, if you will, so that they were a dangerous force, that could lead internal coups, or whether it was just, hey, these are my friends and my buddies, we're going to promote those guys over these people that I don't know so well. And there's definitely that. You can go back to the 18th century and the Napoleonic period, and there was sort of a, and this is, I forget what they used the term back at the time, and I know I've heard it, but sort of, I think the modern term would be sort of a Scottish mafia within, and it's sort of, that's sort of the wrong term, but I can't remember the right term, within the British Army. And outside of the Scottish regiments, within the officer corps, there was sort of a self-support system of Scots selling their commissions a little bit cheaper to other Scots, helping other Scots that are in the officer corps get promoted a bit better. And it wasn't an anti-English thing, and definitely by a lot of the Scots that were involved in this were anti-Jacobite type Scots. So they were to some degree, or rather much so, anti-Scottish nationalistic. They were pro-Greater Britishness Scots, but they were sort of promoting their own within the British Army system, and it didn't leak outside of the British Army system. It wasn't an anti-English system. It was more of a cultural brotherhood. Like if you were to formalize it, because it was, again, my reading shows rather informal. That it was more like, hey, if we all belong to the, supporters of the same football club, or, hey, yeah, he likes the Wildcats, or, pick the sports team, so I'm, or you went to the same college, so, oh, you're a graduate of that college, yeah, I'm, of my, to hiring somebody at a company or to promoting somebody at a company of the 4 candidates, and if they're all otherwise equal and look like they're going to do the job, you're going to pick the, fraternity brother or sorority sister that even if they're, you never met them in that organization because they're younger or something, you're going to bring those people forward. You see, I'm not necessarily subscribing necessarily, because I don't know, a bad motive to keep the Slovaks down. Now, there may have been, like I said, there may have been a worry that the Slovaks weren't fully on board with the idea of Czechoslovakia. That could be it, or it could just be the elites were promoting their friends and associates and people that they knew and were culturally similar, without necessarily realizing how hard it was for the Slovaks to enter higher command, and how few of them were going through the NCO training. And the Germans found this, and with some of their training programs, this sort of came out, that they really didn't have an NCO corps, and that is a very important element to any army, not just having officers. And so, and the Germans sort of were surprised by this, and they were surprised at how poorly the Czechs, or the Slovaks, did on the Eastern Front. And that, I think, is very much part of it. Part of it is lack of motorization, and also, again, how much that the industry, and it goes way back to when we would think of this as Bohemia, that Frederick the Great's Prussia last war was to try to get Bohemia away from the Habsburg Empire, as I want. No, I switched the terms sort of as whether it's the Habsburg Empire as part of the Holy Roman Empire versus the Austrian Empire, versus after the Napoleonic Wars, and there was the Napoleonic Wars that shut down the Holy Roman Empire, and then later shift in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And if you follow me in the way I speak, and so don't, I'm trying to use the terms appropriate for the particular historical period I'm talking about. So when I often would refer to this area as Bohemia, and I'm talking about in the 18th century, I'm using this sort of, in my opinion, non-prejudicial term for this region, as opposed to Bohemia and Moravia as the occupied zone for the Germans versus Czech Republic or Czechia or whatever you want to can now call it, as sort of a shorthand for it. But going back to Frederick the Great trying to get it away from the Habsburg Empire, this was seen as in an 18th century sense, so it's pre-industrial, but a rather industrialized, if you will. I mean, I said pre-industrial, and sort of in that it's not using lots of steam power, lots of industrial revolution, but there is a lot of water power and other human-powered industry within this part, where out here it's just all agrarian. And so that makes logical sense that grows up over time and continues here, and not necessarily spreads to other parts of your nation, because I can see that in the United States, where up until very, very recently, I'm talking the last 20 years, you often had the industrial areas of the United States stay localized, often in the Northeast up here, and just stay there. And after generation, they would do it. Now you're seeing a lot of the industrialization of the South, and it isn't a changing of a culture in the South. It isn't finally post-Reconstruction, because they really limited industry that was in primarily agrarian South before the Civil War. It isn't finally them getting to sort of revitalize. What it is that this part here, all the industry is highly unionized, and which very much delineates who can do what jobs. And so if there's something that needs to be done and there isn't the right type of union guy, we all get to stand around maybe for days, literally, for the right union guy in the right union for the right thing to show up and do that job. We know how to sweep up the floor, but we're not the floor sweepers union. So this spill that keeps us from producing something is just going to have us stand around. Now that you may say is extreme, but it really is literally for hours that they may stand around to clean up the right thing when they've got the materials, they know how to do it, but they can't do it. And when I say literally for days, with some of the way the unions in the entertainment industry here, then it's more the technical behind the scenes people. If you don't have the right sound engineer, you can't do your thing, because the other union people won't touch it. They won't cross their work thing. So they'll literally shut down production of stuff for days or weeks or whatever, just to have to find the person that can come and do it, not as any sort of strike action. So in the Northeast, it's highly unionized, where in the South here, it's an at-will work state, so you can't force unionization. You can have unions, and they are, but you can't like up here you can say, oh, well, this is a union company, and everyone legally in Detroit, and in particular automotive industry, must belong to the union. You cannot, literally it's in the contract with them, you cannot work for X car company unless you're a member of X union. You can't be a freelancer. You must be that in the middle of that union. We're here is, hey, you want to, down here in the South, you want to form a union? Yeah, okay, fine. But you can't force everybody and force them to join as a condition of working. So a lot of the car companies, a lot of the like Boeing, the major aircraft manufacturer, have opened up manufacturing plants, and most of the Japanese car companies that moved factories to the U.S. moved them into the South, into the agrarian South, because they did not have forced unionization, so they could keep it cheaper labor. So I see in the United States how for generations industry stayed in the same areas where it was understood. There was the various expertise as it molded and changed over generations in time, from pre-Civil War all the way through into the mid-20th century. 100 years of change. It stayed very much localized, which for various reasons, including post-Civil War politics, it kept it out of the South. Now you have the industry moving away from highly industrialized areas to unindustrialized areas because it's unregulated in the Union sense. So I can see that just being the case, so that the Slovak army did not have the arms industry, did not have the munitions industry making ammo, did not have the car and other industrial industry to, once they got their independence, to crank out their own stuff. So that's part of the reason for Czechoslovakia not, or Slovakia not doing so well in the East. So, okay. Yeah, we're going to fire this win or close decision. Okay, so. Okay. Our generals recommend we equip our army with win or close. Now, for the life of me, I can't remember. Again, like I said, a lot of my reading is older than some of you are. Now, I know a few of you are older than me, that either I guessed from the way you've talked about things, or you've explicitly sort of said your age. A few of you are older than me, so I know you're not all youngsters. But I also know a few of you are, in your early 20s, if not younger, watching this. So, again, some of you are younger than the time that it's been since I've read some of this stuff. So, things slip my memory. I'm sure it's subconsciously there, but I just don't necessarily remember. I don't specifically remember a specific general or recommendation prior to the start of the invasion of the Soviet Union specifying that, hey, we should do we should make preparations for Russian winter and do extra effort in winter clothes. Also, they say special equipment before the Russian winter sets in, particularly antifreeze. The German, to the best of my knowledge, at this point, well, in 41 at this point, none of the, again, to the best of my knowledge, I may be wrong, none of the German army was at all equipped with antifreeze in any of their vehicles, even though they did have sort of a winter situation. But they just simply had water in their coolant system. That, again, that's my understanding. I could be wrong. So, and then, of course, there's special equipment like, I know I've talked about this before, the sort of snow and mud tracks that they would wrap around, the double sets of tires in the rear of Czech trucks that Tatra made. I don't see anybody trying to do that kind of special stuff, or the Muleter sort of system that the Germans called, which is taking a standard truck and putting a cheap half-track rear area where either a single or double axle tire setup was to create a half-track truck. And those half-track trucks are much cheaper and much simpler to make than a proper prime mover half-track, the big ones that were like towing the Flak 88s, or the smaller ones that were towing the the Pack 40s, or the fighting half-track. Those half-track systems are much more complicated and much more costly. But even the sort of basic, I don't know of anyone of any level advocating for that before the invasion. Not saying it didn't happen. I'm just saying I'm in ignorance of any of it happening. Again, and I've talked about this and other things, and a few of you sort of agreed that the Germans had to have known the rail system in the Soviet Union was, and we'll come to events and talked about this in the alt version of this series, had to know of the different railway system in the East because they had to have experienced it. And there appears to be no significant pre-war planning or preparations for dealing with that difference in gauge. You could have easily, I did a combination of Organization Todt and the RAD working together along with the Reichsbahn to set up teams that would be specially equipped and trained to rapidly go over captured railway systems, and because I think you only have to shift one of the rails closer, I think it's 4 inches narrower. Now it gets a bit more tricky where you have switching points, and so that whole switching point mechanism may have to be rebuilt or replaced. Not that I say rebuilt and or replace. Maybe it's quicker to replace and then take the old and then sort of rebuild it so it works narrower, because I think a lot of the components can be reused, but it just has to be redone. Again, I don't know the details, but sort of the switching point and some maybe a bit more work in some of the rail yards that are captured to sort of get all of that working. And then, of course, you still have a great use for the Russian railway gauge trains for the areas that you've yet to take, but still have a program to, as they become less useful, including of slowly boxing in railway cars and engines in areas that can't connect to other Russian railroads yet, of converting them, going in and chopping the axle and down a little more narrow or whatever, and then re-sticking on the railway wheels so that they're 4 inches narrow gauge. And I think you can do that to at least all the rolling stock. I don't know how easy it would be to do it to the actual engines, but either way, I know of no even drawing up all the, oh, well, we need X amount of people, pre-planning all of that, let alone training and specifying battalions of these non-combat personnel to be ready to go do that. I know of none of that, and everything I've read, though there are some books on the Reichsbahn that I just don't have the money to buy, that are out there, but I know of none of that pre-preparation before the war. So, but combination of, one, those of us who are sort of history buffs that are like to play this as reasonable what-ifs, but also it's a logical thing, is Germany has sort of cold winter, so they got to have a certain level, and they do, of cold weather uniforms. And realizing, because all these guys, I mean, somebody like Rosenberg, I believe, was born in Moscow, as a young kid. But as a young kid, I believe he got pulled out by his parents. And it was definitely, if I'm not mistaken on this, I look it up on Wikipedia right now, but I'm not going to take the time. Definitely to have a multi-generational, clearly Germanic family living in Moscow and not mixing his race. And again, I'm just saying he wouldn't appear to, he'd be like the like Rudolf Hess, who was born in Alexandria. No one was associating that Rosenberg was of mixed race as the Nazis see it. Again, as you know, I reject all of that stuff, but it's just that he was born and had a familiarity with. So from him and others that had to have, and yes, he might not have gotten out and went out and measured the railways to know that it's different, but he definitely knew that Russian winters were cold. These army generals, I'm sure, had all read about Napoleon's campaigns in Russia and the cold weather and how it affects them. So they knew that. And so even if they had been victorious in the one season, another Battle of France, still going to occupy the damn place. So you need to have the winter Russian clothes that are a bit more than just simply German winter clothes, and they didn't have that forward planning. So we can all see that would be a reasonable what ifs, and that's part of why we're doing this. What if I invaded in 42 instead of 41? That's part of what we're doing here. As a reasonable what if, and it's not what if Martians showed up or something. So, okay, it seems the defeatist and the long war is not what we or the Fuhrer expects. Okay. If we choose not to equip them, our infantry will maintain their good order and gaining boost in morale and organization. If we choose to equip them, our nation and infantry will be downhearted that we expect the war to be longer than expected. Many trains, trucks, and horses will be needed to divert to this task, slowing resupply and troop movement. But if we have to fight during the winter, our men and weapons will be much better protected. So we can equip them, gain 5 in descent. Now, I get that they're sort of saying that, hey, this will be a morale disruption. I don't know if it would have been at this time, but part of that, I think, comes from what happened after the first Russian winter, and very much happened on the second one during the end of the Stalingrad campaign. Goebbels very, very much came out for a clothes drive from the German people to get clothes for the German soldiers to wear in winter. And it included trying to get ladies to turn in their winter cloaks, and particularly furs. Not necessarily that you would see, and I don't think so, you'd see Germans walking around in ladies' coats. I mean, they weren't wearing dresses, but ladies' coats. What it was is that they would take the cloth, and particularly the furs, all apart and remanufacture them into, rapidly into a more standardized uniform setting with fur linings, with heavier jackets and cloaks, including unstitching, taking apart the clothes, recutting things, as well as re-dyeing the stuff, because I know they were doing some of that. A bunch of I know they did a lot of the captured Western, like Danish, Dutch, French uniforms that they captured. They ended up, because of various things, including equipping Allied and groups like the Russian Liberation Army and whatnot, finding uniforms for them, as well as local in the West and in the East, a lot in the East, local militia type forces. They were giving out these uniforms to them, but they were often re-dyed, so that, yes, they would have the cut of the Belgian uniform, but they were dyed a dark blue or something like that, so they were sort of unrecognizable as being a Belgian uniform or some such thing, so that they were reusing a lot of that military uniform stock that they found. So again, that may be where their thoughts coming in on the descent. I don't think if you did a true preset, pre-planned manufacturing program, I could easily, like I say, hide it as simply for occupational troops. Lose 2,000 rare materials, okay. Lose the national unity, again, I think that goes to the first one. Gets German army equipped, which affects consumer goods during wartime plus 20%. Combat movement speed minus 20%. Organizational regain, organizational loss. Winter effects plus 25%. Equip knob choice. The war will be over before winter sets in. This is what I did for the alt campaign, because primarily either I was going to win it, or if I was going to lose it, it's going to be the end of the series. Okay, again, like I say, I disagree with the dissent. You may, well, who am I? It's the game, they designed it. Well, I'm a historian, and I'm also a modder. National unity, and again, I sort of disagree with that. Consumer goods during wartime. Now, that I sort of agree with, because that sort of represents potentially the idea of shifting ICs away from making tanks to making, or building, fast building trucks, is converting trucks, or doing clothing, not drives, but just manufacturing heavier stocks of clothing. That I agree with. The percentage, we're just guessing at, people as modders. Just trust me. We have a good, and again, I'm, on an online sense, I know a bunch of the sub modders and modders of the Black Ice as well, that they're good history people, but we're making intelligent, educated guesses is all. So the percentage, I don't see the combat move speed going any slower. I don't see the organization regain rate being worse because of this during this time. Supply land organization, again, I don't see that as a problem. Supply throughput, maybe a bit of that I see because of eventually at some point sending out all the winter clothes supplies and such. So with all that being said, I'm going to go with the knob choice because the winter effects down on the bottom, although greater here, what that is going to do is reduce the black ice induced negative winter effects for Germany once winter hits to simulate historical facts. So that makes it less bad for the Germans. But consumer goods, I sort of kind of wish they'd say just that. But so the combat movement speed and the land organization and regain rate is why I'm going with the knob choice. You could just go, hey, yeah, gamer, you're not willing to do it on the most difficult setting, and I've done it. Yeah, great. Look, I don't play this to prove that I'm able to do it at X hard difficulty settings, and this is going to come up here now. I do it to try to play as best as we can the historical battle, in the sense of when you have disorganization at the beginning of this, is because it's historically that the Soviet command and the Soviet soldier to the high political command and everywhere in between were shocked and unprepared for the German invasion. So that represents the organizational hits and such that early phases of this are going to happen in. Again, this may not work so smoothly like we saw this last time, because a lot of stuff is geared to happen in 41 event-wise. And so we may be seeing events that were geared to happen in 42, the second year of the war, happen at the beginning. We'll see how that goes. I know it's been more than a year, and I know some of the stuff that I talked with them that I think got changed a bit, meaning what they should, and I know some of it did. I didn't remod some of this stuff and didn't check, so I don't know how much. But what, say, Barbarossa Starts sets a flag that says 6 months later, this doesn't fire so long as this flag and it's removed, just so that you don't overstack stuff. Okay, so we have difficulty settings for the initial Barbarossa campaign. These modifiers are added on top of Destiny decisions. Easy Barbarossa. Okay. Well, that would, and I could have done that and mitigated some of the winter effects, and I still am half considering that. Normal Barbarossa. Supply throughput 10% until October 42. Combat movement speed is what's sort of attracting me to that. It was just the combat movement speed and this normal. No extra modifiers hard. Again, and I know some of you have played this even more often than I have. I almost defy any of you to realistically say that you've played 1936's Germany more than I have. I really believe, outside of maybe a couple of the modders, but even them, I don't think any of you have played 1936 Germany, or at least the first, 6 months of it, as much as I have. I'm really defying any of you to claim that, because I've tested Third Reich events so much and played, that sometimes I played to 38, to whatever, just so many times, starting up and playing for the first 3 to 6 months or something, just to see how the mod works, to see if something crashed. I've played that year in now both games so many times. I don't believe any of you, even if you have 4 times, 5 times the number of playing hours, that obviously this is not a Steam copy of this game. And I also recommend, if you have a Steam copy of this game, if you're doing the Black Ice, if you haven't already, move it somewhere else before you start modifying it, because Steam does bad things, particularly to the Podcat EXE. So that if you're playing Black Ice, In this, it should not be against any Steam hours, but even on Hearts of Iron 4, even if you've got many more hours than I do, and though you only see one version of the game. I have two versions of the game. The other one is the beta, and I can see how many hours I play, but you can't see that I even have that game on my Steam library. You got to be somebody in Paradox to be able to see that. You can't see that. So I've got lots of hours there too. But even if you counted up all of my hours together, I still don't think you've got as much as 36 in that game as I do. Many of you have played a lot longer and a lot later, and many of you have more hours. I'm not disputing that, but it's the 36 now. But I know many of you have played through more Russian campaigns than I have, because you've gotten playthrough now. Again, part of it for me is testing Third Reich events. Again, part of it is for when I'm doing new stuff in Third Reich events. Part of it is for playing Third Reich events when the new version of Black Ice comes out. So often I'll play and I'll get to 40 or 41, and then, oh, there's another version of Black Ice out and it looks really, really, really good. I just want to play that new version, so let me update, and I got to update my mod for all the players, and so let me do that and let me start over my campaign. So quite often I've played to whatever and then stopped. So my point is some of you guys have played this very much and now are looking for a challenge. I'm not. So we're going to go with normal Barbarossa. Okay. The world holds its breath. Adolf Hitler said, "The world will hold its breath and fall silent when Barbarossa is mounted." I think he's getting on a horse. Okay. The world did not fall completely silent. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill proposed a military alliance with the Soviet Union on the day of the invasion. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt offered U.S. Lend-Lease aid 2 days later, but the world did not hold its breath. In Washington, the War Department Plans Division expected the Soviet defeat in 1 to 3 months. Again, they were, after seeing the shock, literally it was a shock of the defeat of France, that they saw this thing. Sir Stafford Cripps, the British ambassador in Moscow, predicted a German victory in 3 to 4 weeks, while the British Joint Intelligence Committee gave the Russians a few months at the outside. Indeed, Barbarossa appeared to be, as Hitler claimed, the greatest military operation capable of defeating the Soviet Union. Okay, cool. So, got that. We're not going to punish the enemy. Okay, so we now have this, and we now have 19 ICs needed for that, which cuts into all of our building programs. Bummer. But again, a lot of our building programs still that manpower bonus will help from Destiny there. So let's go. Oh, a little bit faster than that. Okay, now what we need to also do is, oh, I should have maybe done it before. Okay, we're going to call to arms Romania and Hungary. I normally don't or probably should have done it a little before this. Normally don't do that with the Western Allies because other than maybe sending me a few air power stuff, they don't normally do any good. And well, Italy's up here. I want to make sure Italy's in on this because you can get an Italian Expeditionary Corps as well. Okay, and then one there, good. Yeah. I expected that these guys were just going to be starting into the war with the Western Allies, but I don't know how quickly they will get into the war with the Eastern Allies. And I want to see what is a lot of clips, the reality here. Okay, they're just doing some sort of desperate defense, but they're getting stretched. Okay, grand battle plans. Advance, that's good. I really, after playing both games a lot now, I really like this better in a couple of ways. One, I don't mind the idea that you have to know Blitzkrieg, say, before knowing Sherplunk. Not saying that has to, one has to follow the other. I don't mind that progressive system that we see in Hearts of Iron 4, because there is something to that. Again, I'm not saying that that one necessarily has to be, but maybe, shall we say, deep battle plan, or I don't know, it depends on how we define some of these things, may be needed. But what I really do like is that you get better at a particular type of tactic, so that reckless assault or masterful blitz, and which can also happen, these things get better over time as you put more research into it. And it's not just, oh, do you have grand battle plan or not have grand battle plan? It's you have grand battle plan, but you are we give them money for rare materials? No. And this is sort of why we're hurt, because we've lost all of our Soviet trade. As opposed to a binary choice. Do we have our fighters up here? I'm guessing not. No, we need to be up here. Enable airstriking. Good. Okay, you're back in harbor because maybe you've been messed up by the... Well, no, you haven't been messed up. You got moved. We've got some... I did shift a bunch of these here. Yeah, I'll let you get a little more organized. Down here. Oh, I moved a bunch of forces out of here so that they can not be so what do you want to call it? Out of supply. So you can operate there. Okay, good. You probably got in combat with somebody. Okay. Good, and good. Now we've also got here the Army Group Romania and Carpathian Army Group. Okay, Carpathian Army Group. On the 27th of June 1941, the Hungarian government declared war on the Soviet Union, although they had been mobilizing their mobile corps and their air defense since the 22nd of June. Always their neighbors, particularly Romania. The Hungarian, always wary of their Romania. The Hungarians kept the majority of their armed forces in Hungary during 41. However, their best units were sent east in support of Operation Barbarossa in early 41. Initial group under the Hungarian Carpathian Army Group. We lose supplies, but we gained that, sure. Romanian Army Group. Romanians curry Hitler's favor, provided the largest non-German contingent to Barbarossa and formed an important part of Army Group South in Ukraine. The Romanians were also used for actions behind the lines and the investment of cities like Odessa, which the advancing panzers bypassed. Yes. Ooh, that's lots of supplies, but yes. 10,000 there. Okay, now it's... we want to do that, and we are still massively overproducing. This operation with all of its activities going to eat my supplies up. Just completely. Well, let's make sure we get everybody here. I think they're all here. Okay, well, guess we're going to want you in the south as much as anything else, so head there. Oh good, they all have officers. That's good. And let's see, yes, we'll attach you up there. According to von Manstein, he really thought Antonescu was a good general. I don't know if he thought he was a great general or anything like that, but he thought of him as a good general. Where he had very, very little respect for any of the other Austrian, Romanian. All you guys just go across. Is Romania yet in the war against the Soviet Union? Yes, okay, good. And Hungary. Yes, good. We came into it. Well, we're rolling over that guy. Now, I've not yet, like I said, started that, but we are getting ready for that operation there. Now, down here, well, oh, good, you're there. Patrol. You guys invade here. And I want you guys to fly air superiority. Basically, I just want you to fly over there and buzz them. I don't want you to tangle in with the... Okay, so they've got some forces here. They got almost nothing there. So we're going to invade there. And you can stop this. Go home. Because if I have this occupied by Finland and invade here, it'll join Finnish territory. But what I really want to do is get this to be German territory again so that I can run supplies up through to there. Oop, well, we were having a fight down there of some sort. I do have this pocket battleship escorting that. Only thing I'm slightly worried about is submarines there. Okay, radios have advanced. That's great. So we want to stop that. See, the downside is just build cost for improved radio, so we want to do that. Yeah, that's fine. We are defending here. I'm happily defending here. I'm happily because boat 1 is getting these units to attack me there on a good defensive situation while I'm attacking other locations. This one very fast, I hope. Okay, now that we've got that province, well, let's see here. I think this is the fastest way. Yes, very much for this series to make things happen in a more speedy manner. Keep the flow up. I've learned how to do some of this better than I would just my own, because on my own I don't necessarily care about how fast or how many clicks I do something. I just want to have fun with it. And that, but now get that going. So what we're doing is piling all in these guys without now having any delay between attacks. Fortunately, some of these guys are already advancing like they should. Here. Okay, Jaegers against these guys. They're going to win. But these guys who aren't yet moving can support that attack. Okay, we've won a operation against some British unit here. Oh, I guess it's their... What's that? Oh, Nelson. Okay, NEL. Nelson. That's the Nelson, Battleship Nelson, and a heavy cruiser. We've skirmished with at least. Now here. Oh, that was way up. Oh, I'll come up to here. Okay, they're better organized. Let's see if we can drop in here. See if you'll actually launch the attack. Yes, good. That way we can fly in supplies, but I think we're going to win our battle there. But just having the ability to retreat into another province helps out a lot, I think. Okay, here now. Again, I'm going to look for units that aren't actively advancing. We're going to send to the recently taken province. Okay. We're still producing a lot of equipment. As well as supplies and other things. Yes, you can attack with your... we've won it there. Your mechanized forces. And another tech. Okay, rocket artillery increased to 2. Yeah, we might as well do that. I know this episode's going long, but I want to get going on some of this stuff, but I also wanted to cover the various historical elements that I think it's generally at least appreciated by many of the viewers. Okay, now. Selected lots and lots of these forces. But as you can see, I've placed a lot of units here. So this is going to be some of my major forward thrusts. And we're going to start going there, since we've got this province, and to be ready to push where we need to. Let's have the submarines out here patrolling. No, they're countering here. Cool. You keep attacking. Yeah, it's a semi-smart thing to do, but oh good, looks like they're going in unopposed. That's great. Now that I'm seeing that, let's do this. Or put these liners here because they're faster, carry more, and get there. But I want them at least a little bit protected. Now what I want here is some various Panzer and Panzer Corps headquarters. Yeah, you'll fit onto that. Good. Can you join them? No. Get out. Good. Don't know where I'm going to want to use those, but these guys are going there fast. Up here, have they gotten here? No. It's like they're still coming. Those coastal battleships should have good shore bombardment. Well, let's go down and look at Africa. See how we're doing here. That's pushing in there. That's supporting that push. Just takes forever to get there. They're going in there. They're coming here. Now here we're retreating out of here. We were just facing a little too much opposition. This was the last sort of, on Hippel was the last sort of well organized. And I didn't want to come here and have them have a long battle and have them be able to get over the border and then hit us while we were still looking like this. But now by the time they get in there, we'll have much better organization. And oh, these guys have made it here. Cool. No, not let's at least come to here. Start back up that way. But here we now have oh, your speed is weather motorized bonus, but not just to give another HQ. I don't know if we're going to send them out there. Don't know if it'll speed these guys up at all. Not really, so let's well, no, I think the South African front going down after South Africa is more important. I know we're going to send. I'm expecting to attach those to some other units, maybe, but maybe not. I don't know. Let's move that core headquarters in just for when we want to use it. It'll be available. You can see lots and lots of units pouring right through this. Yeah, I guess everything but that SS unit. And then just keep pocket closed. Oh, good. We won against whatever's there. And we won here. Okay, good. Now that we have that, Let's see if we can paradrop here. They disappear on me? Wait, what? I guess they shattered on me? They were attacking the shatter? Okay, well. I'm not planning on keeping these guys here, so let's send that there to pick them up and send them somewhere else. I'm going to try my best not to invade India, but sometimes I just may get greedy and do that. Or I may come down and help the Japanese out down here a little bit with some of these forces. But I just wanted to get these islands to sort of secure my position down here. Okay, these guys are getting into place. Oh. Okay, artillery production has advanced. That is most excellent. So, IC comes down. Basic education has advanced. That will increase our leadership considerably. We did take some of that hit there for the winter clothes. That's just a manpower hit. That's why I don't want to do that. That IC hit. Well, I guess since we may get a boost shortly. Manpower, but not yet. Okay. I think you're going to take that city. They're not well dug in. But they're all advancing. And here, again, let's look for units that don't have one of these red or green arrows. This is sort of my Moscow advance. That's why there's so much stuff here. And we're going to head in that direction. Yes, Flak Division. Now that's just an HQ. And these guys. I don't think these guys have... Yeah, these were just recently SR'd out up here. So, we'll temporarily do that. Oh, we have a major victory already. Okay, here. Now that we've won there, I don't think they're going to be sliding in other forces. Sometimes, say, other retreating forces will retreat there, but I don't think so. Right, now again here. Just keep everything flowing. Okay, they're attacking us there. We won. Now, yeah, we have more Leadership. Hmm. Yeah, we want the SSHQs. We're gonna have a lot of places to occupy. I think that battle's over. Okay. We keep moving, and we move up to there. You can occupy these provinces. Okay, well this episode is already overly long and I know it. So we're going to end it here. I want to thank everyone for watching. I want to thank you for liking the videos. If you would please do so, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Helps the prestige of the channel and helps with various metrics on YouTube. And of course, love to hear your comments. I hope that as you guys are watching, if you have a comment about what I'm saying or correction, because hey, like I say, I get things wrong when I'm winging it off the top of my head. Please post those below. I normally am able to address all of them, if they're whether questions or just comments. So pause the episode, make the comment while you're thinking about it, and then come back to it, because I really do love hearing from you. So see you next time for more Hearts of Iron.